Sit down, grab your coffee wherever you're watching from, with your family, in your bedroom, in your living room. We are back online only, and so it's been a roller coaster, so to speak, and so it's been great to see some of your faces in the last few weeks, and we'll give you more updates on what's coming in the month of August here in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, we are trying to watch what's happening in our country, in our community, and do what's best for you to keep you well, do what's best to keep others well, and so we decided to bring this back online, and we're beginning a brand new series called The Proving Ground. And exactly what I said is we're talking about what it means to prove your potential, what it means to pass the tests that come your way to prove that you can live up to what God has for you. And so what I know about life is that tests come our way often. Tests come our way in many different shapes and forms. And I hate tests. I've never enjoyed tests in school. I hated tests. I failed my driving test the first time. Come on, if you ever did that. But I was a good test taker, and so that's why I was able. I hated studying. I hated prepping, but I was able to kind of get B's throughout high school because I was able to take tests and decipher what the right answer was. ACT, SAT, for those of you who just graduated high school, going to college, you know the stress of those tests. Anybody had a COVID test? Anybody had a COVID test? You know how stressful that can be. I've not had to have one, but I hear it's very, very painful, and they like to do it 2, 3, 4 times to you. But I do love testing my kids. I love testing my kids to see if they'll live up to what I have for them. And so if I'm going to give my kid $100, which I don't do, by the way, I'm going to see how he's going to spend $1 first. If I'm going to trust my kid to weed eat the yard, I'm going to make sure that he knows how to operate the weed eater, that he can weed eat a part that doesn't destroy the yard before I'm going to turn him loose with the whole yard. So there are tests that I allow my kids to go through to prove that they can be faithful and can be trusted with the things that I give them. And so I thought we could do a little test today. Here's what I want to do. I want to throw this picture on the screen, and then I want us to just talk about it for a minute. Go ahead and fire that picture. Here's what it is. It says, when you realize the statue of Mona Lisa looks like Keith Urban. Now, as you see that, look closely, and we'll take that picture down. Now, let's pause for a second. Here's what some of you did. Some of you looked at that, and you thought, wow, the statue of Mona Lisa really looks like Keith Urban. Well, you didn't pay attention. For others of you, you looked at it and said, that's not Keith Urban. And then somebody across the couch looked at you and said, yeah, and that's not the Mona Lisa either. And so here's what happens is we all see things and we assume things, we look at things, and we have different perceptions of it. And this is what social media does to us. This was actually posted, put it back up there on the screen in the video. This is what was posted on social media, and it was amazing in the comments. 70% of the people in the comments said, that's not Keith Urban. Well, it's also not the Mona Lisa. It's not a statue of the Mona Lisa. That is the Statue of Liberty. And so we see these things, and oftentimes we don't even do the hard work of knowing what's really reality around us. And so in this series, what I want to do is teach you to kind of take what life throws at you, decipher it, figure out what it is that you and I need to do to pass the tests that come our way. And so we're talking about test of potential in this series called Proving Ground. And I want you to just hear me when I say this, because as I talk to young adults and as I talk to students sometimes, they say, well, I don't want to hear how much potential I have. Potential is not a bad word, and I hope you'll see that in this series, because potential, listen, once you've reached your full potential, you might as well die, because you have nothing left to give. And so we're always striving toward potential that we haven't been able to attain yet in whatever season of life we're in. So if you're 15 and somebody says you have a lot of potential, it doesn't mean you're not doing well in life. It just means you haven't achieved all the potential that God has put inside of you. And so today we want to talk about the first test that we as Christians face. There's 9. We're not going to tackle all of them in this series, but the first one I think that frustrates us many times the most is the test of time. The test of time. And so time is a unique thing. And I heard somebody say one time, and we're going to put this on the screen, life is God's gift to me. What I do with it is my gift to God. Time is God's gift to me. This life that I have that's comes and goes and fades very quickly is God's gift to me. But what I do with this time, this life that God has given me, is my gift back to God. So here's the question for all of us. Are you passing or are you failing the test of time? We throw that graphic on the screen. How many of you even knew that wasn't the Mona Lisa and that wasn't Keith Urban? That was Owen Wilson and the Statue of Liberty. But the question is that's a little cheap laughter test, but are you passing or failing the test of time? Let me ask it this way. Do you get better or do you get bitter with time? Now, let's pause for a second and say, in this season as a pastor and as a church, this is the season of Corona and the season of we're facing as a country, all the things that are happening. This is a crazy season. And if we're not careful as a pastor, as a Christian, as a staff, as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, you can get very, very frustrated and you can get bitter in this season of time. And so there's this book in the New Testament that Paul writes to the church at Ephesus. Paul was a person who hated Christians, he persecuted Christians, and then he had an encounter with Jesus that changed his life on the road to Damascus. And Paul became a follower of Jesus. The resurrected Christ entered in, had an encounter with Paul. He decided to follow Jesus, and then he goes on to plant churches all across the world, and he writes letters to those churches. And in the book of Ephesians, he's drawing toward the end of the book in chapter number 5, after he's taught them how to stay faithful and live a godly life and have godly character, and he's talked to them about how to run their churches. He says this in chapter 5, verse 15. He says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil." What he's saying is time is a gift. Every moment in time matters. And what we do with those moments in time, what we do, are those times that we have are opportunities to make a difference beyond ourselves. And so right now, as a church, in this season, we've taken this season as a window or a season or a time of preparation for something bigger. As you know, we're in a transition. If you've followed Relevant Church any length of time, we've grown exponentially in the last decade. And we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary in October. And we got a brand new auditorium that's going to be ready to be used here in the next week or so. What we are doing now is preparing for what's ahead. Not sitting back and doing nothing, but preparing. And I believe the greatest days of our church are yet to come because of the staff preparation, because of the things that we're doing as a team, because our heart and soul team, because our leadership, because we're beginning to prepare for the days ahead. But what about you as an individual? What are you doing during this season? What are you doing during this time? What are you doing during a season of time that you never would have dreamed would happen in your life? Here's what I know. We can't do anything about the past, but we can do something about the future. And this rings so true in our culture and in our community today. We can't do much about our ancestors, but we can have a huge effect on our children and how we live and what legacy we pass down in our country and in our world and to other people. There's not much we can do about our history, but there's a lot we can do about our legacy. In other words, we can't change the past, but we can have an impact on the future, and we can make the future better than the past. And so here's what I need you to understand, whether you're watching from home or you pick this up in the office one day. You need to understand your time on earth is not over, and you're not waiting for your time to come. Your time is now. It's not the past. You're not waiting on something for the future. Your time is now. And so what I want to give you today to start this series off is four keys to passing the test of time. Because it will come for all believers. It will come for all of us. Because if your time is now, you're saying, my time is now, I'm living in the middle of a pandemic and racism and all the different things that are happening in our country, and we don't know, what do you mean my time is now? What I'm saying is there's a time right now that God knew you would be here, and there's a purpose in this season that He's preparing you for something bigger. And so here are 4 quick keys to passing the test of time. We've implemented this as pastors, as leaders, as our staff, and we're implementing this as a church as it relates to our future to make a difference in this community. Here it is. Number 1, be patient with the process. Be patient with the process. I've talked about this on numerous occasions in our church's history and what it means to be patient with the process. Every year around Valentine's Day, men will wait until the night before to go and actually get a gift, and you'll have to stand in line. But what happens is people who grow florists will begin to look for roses that are are in the unfolding stage. And what happens is, and I don't know how well you can see this, but what they're looking for is roses that are beginning to bloom, and they have this nice little swirl, and they smell good, they look good. It's the most likely, put them in water, they'll last longer, they'll live longer. The problem is if they can't find roses in the unfolding stage and everything is still wound tight, they can't just go and begin to pull the petals out and expect the rose to look right or function. In fact, when you begin to pull the petals out, you damage the rose long term. You damage the color, you damage the life of the rose. It never looks like it should look. It doesn't live as long because you tried to rush the process. And so the soil is part of the process. The atmosphere is part of the process. Water, sunlight, all a part of the process of the unfolding phase of a rose. And so in our life, it's no different. We go through an unfolding phase. The atmosphere, what's going on around you, directly impacts how you're budding and how you're growing. What happens is we try to push out the atmosphere. We try to push out the chaos. We try to push out all that we see. Listen, I'm not saying take in all of the dysfunction of social media. What I am saying is don't turn a blind eye and run and hide from what the reality of our world is. It's part of the growing process. It's part of the unfolding process. You need sunlight. You need water, figuratively speaking. You need all the things that God has put around you to help develop you into a mature follower of Jesus. It's a season of preparation. And so you got to be patient with the process because preparation now leads to maturity later. And so what are you doing in this season? Are you being patient with the process, or are you sitting back wondering? And here's what happens when we're not patient with the process. It causes all kind of mental dysfunction in our minds, doesn't it? It causes our anxiety to rise. It causes anger and frustrations and feelings and emotions that overwhelm us. So be patient. If you're going to pass the test of time, be patient with the process. Here's the second one. Live in today and not in someday. Live in today and not in someday. I've heard this statement. Hear me out. I've heard it and I've even said it, so I'm guilty. I've heard people say, I can't wait until life gets back to normal. Well, what are we going to do in the meantime? You don't have to live as if you'll start life when whatever happens, when life gets back to normal, or when something happens in our future, then all of a sudden now, when we can gather back together as a church, what are we going to do now? You don't have to wait, young person, student, teenager, until you graduate high school or you graduate college. You don't have to wait till you get married or you have kids or you retire. You don't have to wait till one day or someday. Right now is your day. Here's the thing, though. Your today potential is not your full potential. Hear that. You got to live in what God has put around you today. You got to step up and be faithful in the little things in this season, in this moment, in this window of time. You got to be faithful in the potential that you have now to bud, to unfold, to grow into your full potential in the future. At Relevant Church, we say we exist to help people far from God reach their full potential in Jesus Christ. And here's what I need you to hear if you're watching. I hear people say, I don't want people to tell me I have potential. Listen, the potential that you're living in today is not your full potential. There's more for you. But what you do in this season matters. I love what Ecclesiastes chapter number 3 in the Old Testament says this. It says, He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity, talking about God, in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. What is the author saying? Simply saying that you and I can't fathom what tomorrow holds, what the future holds, what eternity holds. God is the only one that's outside of time and space. This is why we can stand on a platform and look into a camera, and the gospel can go through a camera lens to a TV screen or a device, and you can be convicted or pricked in your heart to take a step toward God, because God is not limited by time or space. God is not limited by this moment or this season of time in your life. He's saying what you're doing today, live up to the potential. Make the most of the opportunity you have right now, because later I've got something bigger and I've got something better. So be faithful in this test of time. The third one is this. Focus on the important and stay out of the urgent. Focus on the important and stay out of the urgent. If you're going to prove your potential, you can't be like most people. You can't get so distracted with the urgent matters of everyday life that you can't do what's important and make the most of the opportunities in your lifetime. We fill our schedules so full of stuff, so full of things that cause urgency because we got this and we got that and we got this. Sometimes you got to go through your schedule, you got to go through your life, and you got to create not a to-do list, but a not to-do list. Scratch some things off, take some things off the calendar, push some things back, and just realize you don't have time for 700 friends. You only have time for a few. Make the most of the opportunities that God has for you. Don't get so distracted by the urgent that you miss out on the important. So what are the important things? When you look at your calendar, when you look at your schedule, what are the most important things? Well, let's just go through a few. Your spiritual development. What are you doing? See, for some of you, you have not tuned in, not one time, maybe 2 times, 3 times in the last 3 months, and you're wondering why you're not growing, why you're so empty. You're not connected to a small group. You're not connected to a super group. You're not doing anything in your own personal life to develop yourself as a Christ follower, and you're doing everything else but that, and you wonder why you're so frustrated in this time. Maybe building a strong marriage. Important, isn't it? Raising godly kids, kids of character, teaching your kids, sitting down, working through the hard things, having the conversations that are uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't have conversations with our kids because we're so busy and so chaotic. Other times because it's just awkward. We got to make the most of those opportunities. We only have them for so long. Here's one. I personally have been looking at this season and looking at what's going on in the world and saying, okay, what do I need to change to help my financial future look better? What do we need to do to make sure that if something more tragic happens, that we're prepared for that? Building financial health and wealth. Serving your church and community, that's important. And you say, well, I can't serve the church. We don't meet on church. Find a way to serve your neighborhood. Find a way to get involved in a small group and love on people. There are people who are hurting that need you. Love on people. You don't have to come to a building to serve. The important things like learning to be generous. Learning to be generous, learning that like everything I have is not mine. It's really entrusted to me by God, and I'm going to live with open hands, and I'm going to be generous. And some people in this season of time have become more selfish than anything else. You're failing the test of time. I talked to some people, and they say, I've used this time to build a healthy lifestyle. Others have let their lifestyle go to pots. They've not taken in. They're depressed. They got all kinds of things going on. They're sad. What are you doing in this season to be faithful in this moment, in today, not someday? Here's the fourth one. Recognize your particular window of time. In other words, what window of time are you in? Windows are like seasons of life, right? So if I'm in winter and I think I'm in summer, I'm going to wear the wrong clothes outside. If I'm in summer and I think I'm in winter and vice versa, it's going to cause all kinds of dysfunction and dumb behavior. You got to recognize the windows in the season. Right now, we're all in a different season of time. A different window of time. And I love what Ecclesiastes, just a few verses earlier, the author says this in chapter 3, verse 1. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the sun. What he's saying is God is outside of time and space. He's outside of his creation looking in. He's also involved in his creation, not like he just set it into motion and moved out. He is outside of time and space, but he's everywhere at all time. He can, but for us, we're so limited, and we've got to make the most of the opportunity right here in front of us. Why? Because Paul told us the days are evil. So let's talk about some windows of time. We're all in different stages of life. We all have different family makeups, financial makeups. We're all in a very similar season of time as a community and as a culture. And we can recognize that we're all in this season that's a pandemic and cultural problems are arising, and we see all kinds of hate and racism, and we see all kinds of different things and opinions, and we're in a political season, and we got all kinds of things that we all are kind of in this window of time that we really don't have much control over except our response to it. But what about in your window of time? What does it look like for you in this season of time, in your window of time? If you're 18, if you're 38, if you're 58, what does it look like? Maybe let's just talk about it. Maybe I've talked to people in this season, they're saying, well, I've decided in this season to go and obtain an education. I'm going to use this season to go and further educate myself, and I'm enrolling in school online. Maybe you're in a season of time where you say, now is a great time for me to focus on really becoming a man or woman of God, because listen, you can't go too many places. I mean, you're starting to be able to open up and go places, but what can I do in this season to really develop my faith? Who can I have to pour into my life? We have our staff and people on our staff that are spending more time with individuals just pouring into their life now than ever before. Maybe you could say, I'm going to spend this time at home with my parents. Listen to me, students, at home with my parents. I'm going to learn in this season to honor my parents because I realize how blessed I am. Now, some of you have a rough relationship and things are dysfunctional, and I get it, but what can you do? What are you doing in your season? What are you doing your part? Maybe you're in a season, a window of time where you have to choose a career or choose a different career. Maybe you're in a season where you're learning to experience what it's like to be single and be content. And not worry about the dysfunctional relationships that can come into your life, but I'm going to learn to be content. Maybe you're in a season where you're dating and you're trying to figure out, is this person that I'm ready to take that next step with? I'm not saying go and pursuing and looking for that spouse, but I'm saying you're in this season of dating or trying to figure out, okay, are we going to take that next step? What are you doing with this season? Are you really considering how to live to your full potential? Maybe you're in a season where you can love your spouse more and spend more time with your family because you're working from home. Learn to build a happy relationship. Learn to serve one another. Maybe you're in a season of time where you can learn to increase wealth or plan for retirement or successfully handle whatever transitions next in your life or teach your children things or prevent healthcare problems in your future or learn from a recent failure or know certain people better. Do you see? Or love your grandchildren more because they need you or thank certain people in your life you haven't said thank you to or leave a legacy for the next generation. You see what I'm saying? There's opportunities in every season for all of us. We're not waiting on someday. Right now, in the middle of COVID-19, right now, in the middle of a pandemic, right now, in the middle of racism tensions in our country and in our world, and with hate and people spewing violence and people wondering what's next and living in the past and wondering how we can recover from the past. All that stuff is right in front of all of us, and we're all trying to navigate. And we know as believers racism is wrong. We know as believers we need order in our community. How do you figure all that out? I don't know, but what I know is this, that we all have an opportunity as individuals to make the most of what God has put in front of us so that we can reach our full potential. What are you doing with this time? Are you making the most of every opportunity? But we make mistakes, don't we? Instead of following those kind of 4 keys, and oftentimes there's 3 mistakes that we struggle with, and here's the first one. We have no plan. You're just sitting back waiting on things to happen. I wrote something down during our worship time. I wrote this down. We can't have a whatever will be mentality. We have to have a mentality that says whatever will be is influenced by me. What is your plan? What are you doing? What are you doing right now to have a plan for when and if? And I'm not saying you don't have to adjust the plan, but get a clear vision of what God has for your future. You have the time, but you're not going to get it from TikTok. God's purposes and plans are not found in TikTok videos or on social media or people's opinions. God's plans and purposes for your life are found in His Word and in your heart, and merging what He's called you to do with what the season of time. How can I make the most and take one step at a time? So we have no plan. Here's the second mistake. We don't include others. Here's what I wrote down. Listen, I read this actually in a book, and I just kind of highlighted it and I put it on my phone. 2 homeless men were sitting on a bench discussing their bad situation. Not making light of that because it's a very real situation we're in. And one homeless man said to the other, he said, I'm sitting here because I listened to nobody. And the other man looked at him and said, I'm sitting here because I listened to everybody. Hear me. You got to know who to include in your plan. If you don't listen to nobody, you can listen to everybody or nobody and end up at the same place. You got to know who you're listening to. Who are you including in the plans? Who are you looking up to? Not the crazy uncle in your life that's destroyed everybody else. I'm like, who is it that you're allowing to speak in your life and challenge you and look at you and say, I'm sorry, but your attitude's in the wrong space in your time. You got some struggles. You got some battles. Let me pray for you. Who is it that's included? But what are we to do? Isolate. The enemy would like nothing more during the season for you to isolate yourself from other people. Here's the third mistake. We don't include God in the plan. Now it seems like a no-brainer. Okay, we're going to make a plan, but this is where it really starts. Okay, I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to include God in the plan, and then I'm going to have others kind of help me navigate the plan. And there are people you are watching and you're asking, God, what do I need to do? How do I, let me know your voice. Let me know your will. Let me know what's next. But you haven't been obedient with what He's already told you to do. Because you failed. Listen to me, and I don't mean this in a harsh way, because you can't do anything about the past, but you can change the future. Listen to me. You failed the test of time to this point. And the reason you failed the test of time is because you keep saying, God, what do you want me to do? And He said, I've already told you some things I need you to do, and you haven't done them. You just want to do more. You want to do different. You want to do your own thing. So what I'm challenging you to do, sitting on your couch, watching in your car, watching from your office, wherever you're listening on a lawnmower. Somebody said, I listen on a lawnmower because I don't like your face. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, my question to you is this. What are you doing to be obedient and make the most of this time and this test of time that we're in right now? Saying, God, I'm going to take one step. We just came off a whole series. Next step, best step. Next step, best step. What are you doing? So, you got to know who you are, and you got to know whose you are. You got to know God to find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference. We talked about that for 7 weeks. I love a quote by Greg Norman. Most of you that are under 30 would have no idea who Greg Norman is, but he was in the 90s. He was one of the greatest golfers in the world. And he had played 3 days after a major tournament at the Masters. He had played 3 days of incredible golf. Some of the best rounds of golf he'd ever played in his life on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then on Sunday, he came out, and everybody expected him to win, and he just flopped. He fell flat on his face. He fell flat on his face, and he couldn't do anything right, and he ended up losing the tournament that he was almost guaranteed to win. And he had a choice rather than blaming something or saying something or ignoring the media. Here's a quote from Greg Norman. I don't mean to make this spiritual or anything of that nature, but there's a lot of profoundness in this. It says, I'm a winner. I lost today, but I'm not a loser in life. I've won golf tournaments. There's people who would want to win as many as I have. He goes on to say, maybe the things I've done to myself are for a reason. Maybe something really good is waiting to happen to me down the road. This is just a test. Can I just say, I don't make light of what's happening in our world, in a pandemic, but it's just a test. Yes, racial tensions are out of control, and there's a lot to be frustrated about. There's a lot of questions of how we got here and equality and how we should all treat each other equal. And racism has no place in the believer's heart. And whether you're black or you're white or you're Hispanic, wherever you come from, whatever you've been through, it's a test. And the greatest person you and I can please, no matter the color of our skin, is the God of the universe. And the way we do is we love Him first and love others next. Love others above ourselves. That's part of our potential, isn't it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Who is my neighbor? Not the person like you. Not the person beside you necessarily. Your neighbor is the person that you have an opportunity to get to know and make an impact in their life. I love the Old Testament, parts of it, I got to be honest with you, it's kind of freaky. They don't understand, but I know that Noah, when he built the ark, the Bible says he waited for over 50 years. You look at the timeline before the predicted rain fell. Abraham, the father of many nations, him and his wife Sarah waited 25 years for the promised son. Joseph, who was promised something, he had a dream when he was 17 years old, and it was 14 years in prison for a crime that he did not commit long before he ever saw that dream become a reality. David would become the king of Israel, but he waited 15 years between the time he was anointed to be king and he actually became the king over Israel and was recognized as a king. It was a test of time. The Jewish men and women of the Old Testament, the children of God, were in exile for 70 years as their hearts and their minds were prepared to make a return to Jerusalem and a nationwide revival. Here's the problem. In that 70 years, when you look back at all of what's happening, some of them were not, their minds and their head and all, they didn't have it all right. But it led to something greater. That 70 years had to be hard and frustrating, but it led to something greater. Paul prepared for 15 years between his calling and his first journey to the world to plant churches. And then he waited another 5 years before he'd write his first letter to his churches. What am I saying? You are currently living in the time of your greatest potential right now. But your greatest potential might not be right now. It may be later, but you're living in a time that pushes you toward it. The time of your greatest potential is right now, because if you don't make the most of today, you'll never obtain it. Your time is now. It's your time, and it's your turn. We have a generation raising up going, one day. We have an older generation going, no, my time's done. No, it's your time now, in this season, in this moment in history. God put you here for a purpose. It's your time. It's your turn. Now listen to me. What you do with your turn affects what happens in your time. Let that sink in. My time in this moment is my turn. What am I going to do in this moment will affect what I do with my time. What happens in my time on this earth. You want to reach your full potential in Jesus, you got to make the most with your today potential. Make the most of this opportunity. Stand the test of time, because whatever you're facing, however long you've been facing it. It's a test. I'm just challenging you to keep your eyes on Jesus. Stay focused on his purposes. And listen, let's keep out of the urgent. Focus on the important. Don't wait till one day, because today is your day. As we gear up as a church for the next few weeks and months, we have an opportunity to make a huge impact in this community. Get involved. Be a part. Be generous. Give. Get involved. First step to serve, to make a difference. We're going to be giving to Honduras financially next week. We're writing a check to Honduras to make a difference in that community, because we have an opportunity now to help our pastors in that community, our churches in that community that are going through literally hell in this season of time. What are you doing right now? Right now, that pushes you toward your full potential, to prove that you can live up to what God has for you. You can't change the past, but you can have a huge impact on the future. Right where you're at, I'm asking you to do something weird, something different. Wherever you're at, I'm going to ask you to stand in your living room. Some of you are like, I ain't doing that. Okay, that's fine. Just stand, close your eyes. And let this moment in time just settle into your spirit. I'm going to pause. And I believe God can speak, not through a camera lens. He can speak right there into your heart in complete silence and give you the courage to face the test of time. So right now, I want you to just say, God, give me the courage. Help me to be faithful. Help me to take what I've learned today and what I've heard and apply it to my life. I'm going to pause and let you pray to God, and I'm going to pray over you before we dismiss today. God, there's so much potential that's untapped on the other side of a camera. God, let us never sell ourselves short. We are your children. Those that have said yes to following you are your children. If there's people watching that have not made a decision, I pray right now they would just say, God, be Lord of my life. Forgive me my sins. Help me to take that next step. Those that have made that decision to follow you, I pray that you would help us, God, to make the most of the opportunities right here in front of us right now. Because what we do with this moment affects what happens in our lifetime. So challenge people to take a step out of their comfort zone and make the most of this window of time. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, church, we love you. We miss you. I want to give you a couple quick things. Don't forget to go to myrelevant.cc and let us know that you're coming to First Step. If you haven't gotten involved, that's the way to get involved. If you're watching online for the first time, why don't you fill out the digital connection card in the link above, and then let us know you're here so we can follow up with you. If you pray to receive Christ, let us know as well in that. You can give online at myrelevant.cc. You can still be a part of the Chair Initiative to give toward outfitting the new auditorium that we hope to be here in a few weeks. We love you. We believe in you. There's a lot to be excited about, and I can't wait to share what's coming. And I think you're going to be blown away when you're back on campus here. It'll come sooner, hopefully, than later. But I can't wait to be back with you and experience doing life together. God bless you. We will see you guys next week for part 2 of Proving Ground.